Welcome back. In other news, Ghana's inflation rate in December 2019 eased to 7.9%. Ghana Statistical Service reports this drop beats the country's annual set target of 8%. The drop represents a 0.3% decrease from that of November 2019. Food was the main driver of inflation. Central Bank, which aims to keep inflation in a band of 6% to 10%, said in November that it sees the rate staying within its target range, barring any unforeseen shocks. And according to the East African Nations Development Agency, Rwanda recorded a 23% increase in investments last year, reaching a total of $2.5 billion. Two-thirds of the projects were in the energy and manufacturing sectors. Agency also recorded $152 million for electric cars, $145 million for affordable housing, and $72 million for solar power. Government expects last year's investment to create thousands of jobs. Rwanda's economy to continue growing at one of the fastest rates in Africa, with the government forecasting expansion at 8.5% in 2019. CEO of Alpha African Advisory, SANYADE OKOLI, joins me in the studio for more on this. Good morning. It's good to have you as always.
Morning, Lee.
Okay, let's start off with Rwanda. Coming from a checkered political history, and of course we all remember the genocide incidents then, Rwanda seems to be making great strides here. So what do you make of that development?
A lot of the stories you've been hearing from Rwanda has been quite positive, especially on the economic side. So if you look at the last 5 years as a snapshot, for a lot of the key indicators, they've been doing well. You know, the economy is growing. I think other than 2016, if you look back the last 5 years, growth rate has been between 4 to 7%, forecasting for it to grow between 8 to 10% over the next 5 years. Inflation has been contained. Unemployment rates are coming down, et cetera, et cetera. So you see growth, and obviously this story you're talking about is on an increase in investment. So they've been very much on the right trajectory from an economic standpoint. The area for more contention has been on the political standpoint, because the President Kagame has been in power since about 2000. His current term is due to expire in 2024.
I think there was a referendum for his continued stay.
Yes, I think he's now indicated, there was a Bloomberg story a few weeks ago, he's indicated that he has no intentions of seeking further re-election
getting the blessings
after
of the people,
2024. So, you know, the question is about whether or not he really has been coming against political opponents and the media. But generally, from an economic standpoint, very good news there. And also, when it comes to the gender balance of his government, Rwanda stands out.
And at least we've seen a measure of consistency here. And
Yes.
I think that's key to any economy, as it were.
And I must admit, it's hard not to compare it to a country such as Sierra Leone. So they too are post-conflict. And they have not enjoyed a similar recovery. You know, even if you put the Ebola issue aside, they haven't enjoyed a similar case of recovery.
I guess it's all boils down to prioritizing and having challenges along the way.
Well, strong leadership. You know, I think at some point you have to ask yourself the question, you know, would you rather be in a country that is growing and doing well with perhaps some form of control and lack of political liberty, or a country where you have the liberty, but the economy is not doing well? And, you know, there's an expression in Sierra Leone right now where they say ground dry, i.e. the ground is hard, it's not productive, and, you know, things are difficult.
Very good. Now, let's look at specific here. Key sectors of the economy, energy and manufacturing also got a boost. So what's the implication of all these critical sectors on the long term?
So let's compare it to the story we discussed in 2 days ago on South Africa.
True.
So that is a reminder of how key the power sector is to the growth of an economy. And you're talking about power and manufacturing, really to do any form of sensible, growing, cost-effective manufacturing. You need power. So it's good to see that they've been investing in that. And that country also has quite a few. Hydroelectricity is one big source of its electricity. So they're looking at clean energy. I think you also mentioned 152 million spent on electric cars. So it speaks to the fact that they're quite
moving with time, as it were.
Yes, sometimes you speak to people in this part of the world, and they almost feel like paying attention to the environment is a luxury that we cannot afford. That the West have enjoyed growth whilst polluting the world. So we should be given our time to kind of enjoy dirty energy.
I was going to ask you about the impact on the environment. You're on the way there.
Let's keep talking. So, but I don't think we can afford to not consider the environment. You only have to read the news today. What is going on with Australia, et cetera, et cetera. It's a luxury nobody in this world can afford. Not our generation, and certainly not the generations below us.
Indeed, you're right. Now, Rwanda is also targeting 200,000 new jobs annually. So how ambitious is this and how practical?
Well, the investment they enjoyed last year was supposed to, some of the investments stimulated jobs of about 35,000 new jobs. So 200,000 does seem a little high. You have to ask yourself what level of investment will be required to achieve that, and how realistic is that? But then in the context of, though unemployment has been going down, it's still northwards of 10%, if I remember rightly, somewhere between maybe 13, 14, 15%. So obviously still higher than they would like. So you understand why jobs for them is key. And, one would say better shoot for the stars, because at least, even if you land on the moon...
You can set the bar higher.
Well, exactly.
All right, now let's take a look at Ghana inflation. What we're hearing is a fall, and they've also beat the inflation target for 2019. So what is the implication for that? I see a lot of macro managing here on the part of Ghana, and we're seeing some positive news.
I think any positive news is always good.
Good.
I think any news that says a government targeted a particular, had a target and hit that target is even better news. And when they exceed their target, what are we talking about? So it's positive, and if they continue on that trajectory, they've mentioned the band of 6 to 10%, so we're looking 7.9, so just in the middle of that band. So continue the trend of towards 6% will obviously be very good for the economy, because again, sorry, I'm drawing parallels between different stories we've covered over the last few weeks. If you remember that in Liberia, the march that took place on Monday, one of the key drivers behind that march was skyrocketing prices, and inflation's northwards of 20%. So lower inflation is just good all around.
And just to add to that, if you remember, not too long ago we were talking about this issue of tourism and the impact it's having on that sector as well. So to a large extent, we see diversification of that economy.
Clearly, Ghana is the darling of the diaspora at the moment, and the envy of some of its neighbours, dare I say.
Indeed. Maybe we should take a cue from that as well. So the cedi also gained against the dollar. That's around December, as it were, and we're seeing such developments. So what does that tell you? Well,
because they have had in this issues with cedi, obviously. Fluctuating and not retaining the level of value they wanted. And I think it was this week or sometime recently where they issued new higher denomination notes. And I think some of the people, a bit of public questioning as to why that should be. So again, we see them making a concerted effort to manage the inflation, the foreign exchange rate. But even in terms of the money management and the currency management, etc.
So it's obviously definitely a positive development there, and hopefully we'll see more consistency, and others will take a cue from that. So SANYADE OKOLI, CEO Alpha African Advice, would like to thank you very much for your thoughts on those issues.
Thank you, Neil.
Good to have you.